Today, I would like to talk about the embodied thinking. Uh, my talk will be about um, uh, about 60 minutes long. So, uh, but as you know, my English pronunciation is not so good, so I show you almost text I read on the screen. So I share my screen. Just a moment, please. Yeah, can you see it? Okay, yeah. So, yeah, my talk's title, What Value Can Embodied Thinking Create? So, I founded uh, a research institute on embodiment last April, together with colleagues from my university, Kansai University. We launched it as a kind of a venture initiative. Our aim to advance both research and practice related to the embodiment, particularly in implementing the significance of embodied thinking in society and creating new forms of value through it. So, in my presentation, I I will explain my understanding of embodied thinking based on Eugene Gendrin's philosophy, particular his theory of experiencing and the method of focusing. I will also introduce the activities and vision of the Embodiment Research Institute that I established. Through this presentation, hope to contribute to the goal, the freedom to make sense project. So, uh, my talk consists of three parts. Uh, first chapter, I will outline Gendrin's philosophy and his theory of experiencing. I will explain why he described his philosophy as a new phenomenology. Based on this discussion, I will define the concept of embodied thinking and compare it with 4E cognition, especially embodied cognition in cognitive science. I'll also discuss the relationship between embodied thinking and conceptual or logical thinking. But this is first chapter. So next is the second chapter, second part. I will present a practical example of embodied thinking through its application in cognitive neuro rehabilitation. This is second part. And third chapter, I will introduce the activities of Embodied Research Institute and show you how embodied thinking can be implemented in society. I believe that this research is closely related to the spirit of the MakeSense project, this project, which promotes embodied experiential mindful research and education. And I should be noticed in advance that parts of uh, this talk's chapter 1 and chapter 2 overlap with a presentation I gave at the Conference of Nordic Society for Phenomenology in 2023 at University of Iceland. So this is introduction. So I move to the first chapter. So, first chapter title, the embodied thinking that in the new phenomenology. Section 1, Gendrin's philosophy and the theory of experiencing. So, uh, let me begin with a brief explanation of Eugene Gendrin's philosophy, in particular, his theory of experiencing. Gendering is widely known for developing the method of focusing and focusing-oriented psychotherapy. What is focusing? I think you all know it very well, but I speak it briefly. Focusing is a process in which we pay attention to our first sense in the body. Through this attention, we gain new insight or new awareness and deepen our understanding of ourselves. In Genderin's books, Focusing, he writes, next is quotation, I called the process focusing. It is a process in which you make contact with a special kind of internal body awareness. I call this awareness a felt sense. Focusing, page 10. Later, Gendrin applied this idea to psychotherapy and developed a method in which people can overcome stress and psychological suffering through new self-understanding. He called this approach focusing-oriented psychotherapy. The philosophical foundation of focusing is Gendrin's theory of experiencing. This theory investigates how new meaning emerges when felt sense is expressed in language. Gendrin therefore asks two main questions. First question, how do felt sense and symbols such as words and concepts interact with each other? Second question, why does this interaction generate new meaning? In my interpretation, this creative interaction occurs because there is always a gap between felt sense and language. Felt sense always contains more meaning than language can express. Gendering refers to this as the more, or the intricacy. The implicit is always functioning, is in our thinking and speaking. As Gendrin writes, next is quotation, the more is always available whenever we think or speak. Felt sense is also described as a large mass of undifferentiated experiences. We pay attention to this vague bodily sense and attempt to put it into words. When a part of felt sense is symbolized, fragments that were previously unnoticed begin to emerge. At the same time, we realize that much more remains unexpressed. The felt sense is an inexhaustible whole. It interacts with symbols, transforming them while generating novelty in both felt sense and the symbols themselves. Gendrin argued that this dynamic interaction is the essential nature of the experiencing. Following the quotation, we do sense more meaning than we have symbolized. We employ symbols, but invariably the processes of meaning that occur exceeds the meanings that are symbolized. Felt sense is always more than words or symbols, and it is far more complex. In the interaction between the two, the gap or discrepancy demands a new symbolization, while simultaneously prompting us to feel more deeply. As a result, new meaning and new insights are born. It is precisely these newly generating meaning that make counseling effective. So I have just brief reviewed the concept of focusing and the theory of experiencing. I move to second section, new phenomenology. Gendering called this theory of experiencing a new phenomenology. He considered Edmund Husserl to be one of the primary predecessors of his own philosophy. Following quotation, Husserl may be said to be the first to base philosophy quite explicitly and deliberately on an examination of experiencing as we actually live, have, and are. The fundamental method of Husserl's phenomenology is scale, a domain unique to phenomenology, that is the domain of pure consciousness, through phenomenological reduction, and to describe the events occurring within the domain, in other words, to symbolize experience. Through this method, Husserl sought to clarify the essence of experience. In his terminology, structure of consciousness, such as intentionality, noises noema, and temporal structure, temporal consciousness structures like retention, primary impression, and pretension, and etc., are grasped descriptively. Therefore, gendering regard Husserl's phenomenology as a precursor to his own theory of experiencing. However, gendering also proposed a significant development phenomenology. Next is quotation. I show a new approach to what phenomenologists call phenomena, a deliberate way to think and speak with what is more than categories, concepts, theories, assumptions, distinctions, etc. Some categories are always implicit in language, and language is always implicit in any human experiencing. As this quotation indicates, gender introduced into phenomenology a method for working with that which transcendent conceptual categories, namely, working with the first sense, thinking with the first sense. Both phenomenologists and gendering begin with the description of experience. Description clarifies the structure of experience and the modes of living that lie behind phenomena. However, what gendering seeks to add to phenomenology is this insight that the very act of describing an experience changes the experience itself. Subsequently, generating new descriptions and carrying the experience forward. When we speak about an experience, the first sense itself shifts. This new bodily sense then leads to new words and new understanding. Gendering calls this circular interaction between experiencing and the symbol reflexivity. This reflexivity is one of the most important characteristics of gendering philosophy and serves as the foundation for his new phenomenology. Next is quotation. The main significance of our reflexivity is that since we refer to experiencing directly both in assertion and in our method of reaching these assertions, naturally then, what we assert of experience must apply also to experience, as we have been employing to reach these assertions. Through this process, meaning is continuously created and developed. He calls this dynamic process the phenomenology of carrying forward. This phenomenology does not only describe experience, it also moves experience forward and opens new possibilities for understanding the world. So this is the second section. So I moved third section, embodied thinking. Based on this theory of experiencing and phenomenology of carrying forward, I will now discuss today's main theme, embodied thinking. First, I will define embodied thinking. This refers to what Gendrins calls thinking from felt sense, thinking with felt sense. Since felt sense is a pre-linguistic bodily feeling, this means thinking by utilizing such bodily feelings. To illustrate the characteristics of this type of thinking, I will compare it with embodied cognition as discussed in cognitive science. In contemporary cognitive science, there is a growing proposal to revise the traditional view the mind and thinking solely as information processing within the brain. A leading example of this is 4E cognition. This framework suggests that cognition possesses four key dimensions: embodied, inactive, extended, and embedded. It means 4E. With this framework, cognition and thinking are reframed not as events occurring exclusively inside the brain, but as processes that emerge through interaction with the body and the environment. In Gendrins theory of experiencing as well, thinking is understood to emerge through the interaction between symbols and felt sense, external factors, and the body. Therefore, 4E cognition and the theory of experiencing align in the claim that thinking is not an abstract calculation or algorithm performed within the brain, but an experiential process in which the body, situation, and language interact. In this sense, both 4E cognition and Gendrins emphasize the significance of embodiment. However, I believe that embodied thinking in the theory of experiencing is different from that of 4E cognition. What exactly is the difference between them? I suggest that they can be distinguished by two primary points. First point, the two, 4E cognition and Gendrins, understand the term body differently. Embodied cognition primarily views the body as a biological entity or biological organ, focusing on sensory, motor, and perceptual systems. In contrast, in Gendrins conceptualization, the body refers to the subjective body that encompasses relationship with emotion, situations, atmospheres, and the environment. This is first point. Second point, there is a difference in their models of grasp. In 4E cognition, thinking is considered to be dependent on the body, but this dependency is categorized as either weakly embodied cognition. It is partially dependent, or strongly embodied cognition, it is constituted essentially by the body. The position of weakly embodied cognition adopts the representational and computational model of cognition, which views thinking as an information processing procedure with the brain, while suggesting that these processes are partially depend on the body and the environment.
Presentation.
In contrast, the theory of experiencing does not adapt this representational computationally model. That is, it doesn't conceptualize thinking as information processing. Arguments for strongly embodied cognition reject the representational computational model, maintaining that thinking is essentially constituted not only by events with the brain, but also by external factors, that is the entire environment and the body. In this sense, it shares common with the genderist argument. However, the models' interaction differ. While the former, for cognition and strongly embodied cognition, claims that thinking is based on the interaction between bodily movement, action, and the environment. On the other hand, theory of experience focusing on the interaction between bodily feeling, experiencing, and symbols. This difference in interaction is also reflected in the phenomena each theory seeks to explain. For cognition examines the process by which the body responds to the environment, aiming to understand cognition through adaptation to situations and success of actions. In contrast, in the embodied thinking of theory of experiencing, the focal point of the discussion lies in the generation of meaning. Gendering views processes such as verbalizing a sense of unease, the emergency of new understanding, and shifts in how a situation is perceived, not merely adaptation to a situation, as the carrying forward of meaning. Therefore, genderist embodied thinking can be defined as a mode of thought that, starting from bodily experience, reconstructs not only the understanding of a situation, but also its meaning, situation's meaning and perspective. So this is a subsection. So I move to fourth section, embodied thinking and logical thinking. Next, I will examine how this embodied thinking differs from the conceptual and logical thinking we generally envision. First point, there is a difference in perspective. Logical thinking emphasizes an objective, universal, and observer-oriented viewpoint. Its goal is to reach a conclusion that remains the same regardless of when or by whom it is conceived. In contrast, embodied thinking begins from stated viewpoint, that is a perspective embedded with a specific context. It prioritizes the meaning and perspective that open up from subjective position with the world. Therefore, the first-person perspective of thinking subject is indispensable. This is first point. Next is second point. They differ in their attitude towards the question. Logical thinking generally proceeds with the aim of finding answer to the given problem. On the other hand, in embodied thinking, the starting point is a sense of unease, a feeling of not being able to express it well, or a global sense of the situation. Through this, the question itself is reconstructed. The third point of difference is creativity. While logical thinking basically involved reasoning within an existing conceptual framework, embodied thinking gives rise to new language, new metaphors, and new perspectives. Based on these differences, one might get the impression that embodied thinking rejects logic. However, gendering does not reject logic or logical thinking. Rather, gendering repositions it within a broad process of experiencing. While logic is an important means of clarifying meaning, it cannot express the totality of experiential meaning. Thinking is a circular process. Felt sense, language, felt sense, and so on. Through this process, new meaning, new questions, and new ways of relating to the world are created. So, summary of the first chapter. In this chapter, based on gendering theory of experiencing and his vision of a new phenomenology, I have defined the concept of embodied thinking. Thinking is not an abstract computation within the brain. Rather, it is a process in which new meaning is generated through the interaction between body, felt sense, and language or concept. The felt sense is an undifferentiated meaning, a bodily grasping of one entirely situation, and the gap between this sense and language gives rise to new meaning. This approach is thinking regards the body not merely as a sensory motor system, but as a subjective body engaged within situation. It reframes thinking not as information processing, but as a process of meaning making and the reconstructing of situational understanding. Furthermore, this perspective does not reject conceptual or logical thinking. Rather, it repositions it within a broad process of experiencing. So this is the first chapter. So I move to the second chapter. So second chapter, an example of embodied thinking, cognitive neural rehabilitation. In second part, I would like to explain the practical value of embodied thinking through an example from cognitive neural rehabilitation. First section, what is cognitive neural rehabilitation? Cognitive neural rehabilitation is a theory of rehabilitation proposed by Italian neurologist Dr. Carlo Perfetti. It has developed as a therapeutic approach that works on the relationship between cognition and the body, moving beyond merely muscle strengthening and motor training. A defining characteristic of this approach is its conceptualization of bodily movement, not as a simple physiological motion, but as a cognitive process encompassing perception, judgment, and the understanding of meaning. Another important feature of this method is that it emphasizes the first-person experience of the patient. How does patient feel their own body? How does patient experience the relation between the body and the world? Such experiences can only be directly known by the patient. For this reason, cognitive neurorehabilitation pays close attention to the patient's own verbal description of bodily experience. So, in this sense, cognitive neurorehabilitation can be understood introducing a phenomenological method into medical practice. Indeed, Perfetti himself was influenced by Husserl and Merleau-Ponty. So, second section, why focusing is effective in cognitive neurorehabilitation. At this point, gender focusing theory becomes very important. As we saw in the previous chapter, the body contains a felt sense that had not yet been expressed in language, but already included an implicit understanding of situation. In focusing, a person pays attention to this perceived, a felt sense, and tries to express it in words or metaphors. Through this process, new understanding and new insight can emerge. The key point here is reflexivity. When we express an experience in language, the experience itself changes. This idea is also very important in cognitive neurorehabilitation. A patient speaking about their own body is not merely reporting its physical state, physical situation. Rather, it has the potential to transform how their body is experienced. Dr. Perfetti described this process as follows. So, quotation from Perfetti's books. Metaphor and experience influence each other. That is, just as experience changes metaphor, so metaphor changes experience. Similarly, relationship is with the organization of the central nervous system, CNS, is also bidirectional. Just as metaphor and experience change the organization of the CNS, so too metaphor and experience are changed by the organization of the CNS. Therefore, focusing has a strong affinity with cognitive neurorehabilitation. It provides a way for patients to explore their bodily experience and develop new understanding. So, third section, constructing a new relationship with the world through embodied thinking. I will now introduce a specific case, a specific example. Some details have been modified for this presentation. There was a case of a patient who was unable to stand up from seated position in chair. Normally, when a person stands up, they pull their heels back towards their body, bending knee joint deeply. At this point, the knee angle becomes at least 90 degrees or less, generally reaching about 70 to 80 degrees. By pulling heels back, the distance between the center of gravity located around the lower abdomen and soles of feet decrease. This allows the person to shift their center of gravity over their feet by simply leaning the upper body forward slightly, making it easy to stand up. However, this patient perceived their own knee angle as being less than 19 degrees, even though it was actually at around 120 degrees. Please look at the next picture. So, reality, the patient's knee angle over the 120 degrees. But the patient recognized his bodily position, his knee angled as 90 degrees or less. So he has misunderstood his posture. It can be said that this patient suffered not only from physical dysfunction, but also from damage to their body schema and body image. Even when the physical therapist pointed out the knee angle or showed a video of patient's own movement, patient's perception did not change. What the patient required was to reorganize their body schema and body image using their own sensations. A focusing-oriented intervention was conducted. The patient was encouraged to verbalize their bodily feeling through the questions such as, how does your knee feel? Where do you feel the tension? Or how do you feel your body when you try to stand up? The patient began to put their bodily sensation into words. The patient then began to notice various bodily sensations through verbalization like, my feet feel fuzzy. It feels like my body is being pulled backward. Or I feel the weight in my lower back rather than in my knee, etc. Through this process, the patient gained a new awareness of their own body. Ultimately, their perception of knee's position and bodily balance began to change. What is occurring here is not a mere collection of information. The patient is forming a new understanding of their body and reconstructing the relationship between their body and the world. This process is precisely a concrete example of embodied thinking as described in chapter 1, first chapter. As defined, embodied thinking is the process of generating new meaning and understanding by according to bodily experiencing and verbalizing it. In rehabilitation, this process functions not only as the recovery of physical function, but also as a process through which the patient reestablishes a relationship with the world. The patient does not simply regain motor skills. They acquire a new way of engaging with the world through their body. In this sense, cognitive neurorehabilitation can be understood as both a medical process of physical recovery and a process of constructing a new relationship with the world through embodied thinking. So this is the second chapter. So I moved final chapter, third part. Third part, social implementation of embodied thinking. While I have discussion the application of embodied thinking within rehabilitation, I believe it can be applied to a much broader range of fields. I would now like to elaborate on this. First section, I'm introducing the Institute members. The Institute of Embodiment is a research organization founded by a diverse group of scholars specializing in fields such as philosophy, psychology, neuroscience, pedagogy, aesthetics, and architecture, all centered around the theme of embodiment. Due to time constraints today, I would like to introduce four specific members, my colleague. So, this is a picture of my colleague and a member of our institute. So, 10 scholars. So, I just So, first is Professor Genji Sugamura. Professor Sugamura specialized in embodied psychology, researching the influence of posture and physical spatial arrangement on cognition and emotions. His work explores themes such as how a person's sitting position at a table or their physical posture can alter emotions and interpersonal impressions. Furthermore, as a board member of the Japan Mindfulness Healthcare Society, he is actively involved in research on somatic attention and mindfulness. Second is Professor Hiroki Komuro. He specializes in embodied education and researches the role of the body in education. He particularly emphasizes a perspective that views education as not merely knowledge transfer, but as character building, the formation of a cultured person. Through practical research on meditation and yoga, he is yoga master, so he explored how bodily experience contributes to human understanding and the formation of ethical consciousness. So, yeah, third member is Professor Haruhiko Murakawa. He Professor Murakawa is a researcher in integral studies of body and mind. He got PhD in California. He has experience participating in gendering thinking at the HTAE workshop. Currently, he researches nursing care within local communities, investigating how bodily experience and communication function in medical and caregiving settings. And last, yeah. Fourth member is Professor Tomohiro Ishizu. Professor Ishizu studied neuroaesthetics in London and Vienna. He is highly acclaimed in the field of neuroscience for demonstrating that the medial orbit frontal cortex of brain is activated during the appreciation of aesthetic object. More interestingly, he's discovered that the same brain region, so medial orbit frontal context, it's difficult pronunciation, the part of a brain. So the same brain region is activated when a person witnesses another ethical action. This research could be said to provide neuroscientific evidence for Aristotle's insights, which positioned the beauty at the very roots of ethics. So it's very interesting. So in addition to their members, the institute includes researchers from diverse specialized fields such as clinical psychology, educational psychology, architecture, media studies, and experiential learning theory. In short, this institute was established as a research hub where multiple academic disciplines intersect under the common theme of embodiment. So, second section, philosophy and activities of institute. The philosophy of this institute is very simple: to implement embodied thinking in society. This is our ultimate goal. As discussed in Chapter 1, embodied thinking is a process through which new understanding emerge from the interaction between bodily experience and concepts. However, this idea should not remain only a philosophical theory. What matters is the value it generates within society. Our institute aims to translate this embodied thinking into social practice. So, third section, collaborate research with industry. As a concrete example of our institute activities, I would like to introduce our collaborative research with the corporate sector. We are currently moved forward with joint projects with several companies. I will speak within the scope of my confidentiality obligations. First is Osaka Gas Company Limited. Osaka Gas is one of Japanese major energy companies headquartered in Osaka. It supplies natural gas and electricity to millions of customers in the Kansai region, and is also involved in energy solution, urban development, and advanced technology businesses. In our joint research, we focus on bodily experience within living spaces, exploring how people sense value and beauty in their daily lives. This can be described as an attempt to redefine the quality of life itself, moving beyond the traditional scope of energy infrastructure. This is first case. And second case, next is our collaborative research with Akachan Honpo. It means the baby authority, founded in 1932 and headquartered in Osaka. Akachan Honpo is recognized as a comprehensive child rearing support company, involved in the development and sale of baby, maternity, and kids products. In present-day Japan, the declined birth rate has become a major social issue. When addressing this problem, we must look beyond the mere birth rate statistics. What is required is to foster a culture that supports child rearing as a whole society. In our project with Akachan Honpo, we are researching the bodily experience of a child rearing, the sensation with the parent-children relationship, exploring the potential for creating a new culture. This is the second case, and third case, finally. There is our joint project with Godo Incorporated. Godo is a company that develops behavior change programs utilizing generative AI. As generative AI and data transformation continue to advance, how far can our understanding of human behavior involve. By integrating non-verbalized bodily sensations such as hesitation, unease, deep resonance, and silence, etc., into AI technology that expands empathy and potential. Our project aims to develop an intelligence that enable completely new dimensions of human understandings. So, summary of this chapter. As described above, the Institute of Embodiment functions as a research hub connecting philosophy and psychology, neuroscience, pedagogy, and the industrial world. I am convinced that the activities of our institute resonate deeply with the embodied experiential and mindful research promoted by the MakeSense project. So I move to conclusion and I wrap up my presentation. In this presentation, I have discussed the value generated by embodied thinking. First chapter, based on gendering theory experiencing, I defined thinking as a process in which new meaning is generated through the interaction between first sense and the words or concept. Second chapter, through the case of cognitive neurorehabilitation, I demonstrated that the verbalization of bodily experience transforms one's understanding of the body, serving as a catalyst for the patient to reconstruct a new relationship with the world. Chapter 3, I introduced the activity of the Institute of Embodiment as an endeavor to implement this embodied thinking into society, showing the potential for its expansion into diverse fields such as education, healthcare, and cooperative activities. As I have argued, embodied thinking is not merely about acquiring new knowledge. It is about creating new meaning and value within the world. I believe that the study of embodied thinking will become increasingly vital in the society of the future. This is because in our modern era of rapid AI and digital technological advancement, we are once again confronted with the question, what does it mean to be human? If thinking were nothing more than information processing, the distinction between humans and AI would gradually diminish. As many have pointed out, it is precisely because we live in the age of AI that the embodiment through which we experience the world is of paramount importance. Thinking that creates meaning from bodily experience can generate a multitude of new values. As such, it possesses a unique and inherent value of its own. So thank you for your kind attention. So.